Thank you for being back. This is the last part of our day. It has two sessions, one on technology, one on the arts. I think you know enough about our Delphi Cube by now to realize that those are two sides of our Delphi Cube. So we are going to discuss flourishing through or despite technology with our moderator that I would like to introduce, Katerina Kafentzi. Katerina, known very well in Greece as Kafka. She is one of our biggest Greek music specialists, but also an amazing radio producer. I have to say that looking at our panel, I felt a little bit uncomfortable to have a moderator who would be a fourth man. So it was clear to me that it had to be a woman, and I know that Katerina, although she's probably less of a technology specialist and more of a music specialist, will be able to handle this panel very well. So please give her a warm applause. The second panel that will follow will be about the arts. This will be moderated by Myrto Vounatsou, who deserves a very warm applause because she is always hidden somewhere, running somewhere around, but I want to say, and say it publicly, loud and clear, that she's the heart of very much of what the World Human Forum is doing, and that we would never be able to have reached the point we have reached after 7 years without Myrto's incredible imagination, creativity, and affection. So, thank you, Myrto. And I'm leaving it now to Katerina.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you. So, first off, what I really want to say is that I may be a music person, but I wouldn't be able to not perform music, but listen to music the way music it performs itself today without technology. So I may have one or few things to say about technology, bad or good ones, it doesn't really matter. So I was wondering, is technology a bridge or a breach in human flourishing? Does technology help or hinder society's well-being? Can generative AI weaken human discipline, skill, and community? What does it mean living well and responsibly in a world of chatbots and generative AI, flourishing through or despite technology? While conducting a rather hardcore research prior to our today's discussion, I've come up with 1,000 questions, and I'm not sure whether I'm looking for an answer here today or a comfort zone, to be honest, when it comes to choices, how to cultivate disciplines, skills, and communities as we adventure into this new, brave new world. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you, Alexandra and Myrto, for all this wonderful job you've been doing, and of course the rest of the team. So it's high time we welcome three wonderful men who have committed themselves to the hard work of building institutions with strong self-correcting mechanisms on the beginning of a new chapter in the evolution of life. And that is perhaps the most important takeaway this discussion has to offer today. I would like to welcome Mr. Gary Bolles. I can't. He's the author, The Next Rules of Work, Chair of the Future of Work, Singularity University, lead speaker, European Brain Foundation representative. Am I missing something?
That's plenty, believe me.
Mr. Konstantinos Karachalios, strategy advisor to the Executive Director of IEEE, am I correct? former managing director of the IEEE Standards Association. Actually, IEEE, it's an organization dedicated to advancing innovation and technological excellence for the benefit of humanity. It's the world's largest technical professional society. Is that true? Because I had to do some research. Thank you for being here with us. And last but not least, the musician. Mr. John Havens, founding executive director of the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. Heartificial intelligence. That's a heartfelt title, by the way. Huh? Thank you so very much for being here with us today. So you have 10 to 12, sometimes 15 minutes, but let's say 10 to 12 minutes to speak from your heart about technology. Okay? You want to go first?
I'll jump in first. So thank you so much, Kafe. I really appreciate it. So do you mind bringing up the slides for the... We have a saying at Singularity University, AI, artificial intelligence, is easy, but AV, audiovisual, is hard. So I'm glad that humans have overcome the technology once again. So, all right, so going back into the 1980s, I've been a child of Silicon Valley, and I've been able to have the privilege of meeting many people that, in the founders of many different organizations, and seeing sort of the threads of how technology is changing. And so I want to tell you now that there is a new technology coming, and it is going to transform human labor. It's going to 10x what each human can do. It's going to help us to be able to be far more productive and solve far more problems than we ever did before. It's called the ox-drawn plow. Now, what the ox-drawn plow will allow all of us to do, because of course we're laborers in the field, is to no longer be reliant just upon our own two hands, but we have technology that will allow us to plow a field and to be able to plant far more than we ever did before. There's just one problem. If you can't afford an ox and a plow, then suddenly there is now a dichotomy in our economy. And this is actually a recent article by the University of Oxford talks about this as being the first actual business model that the roots of inequality are based in, where the technology and the ability to buy the technology separated it from human labor. And of course, with AI, we're making the same mistakes. We're having the power to create these technologies concentrated in just a few hands. And so the result is that we're laying the groundwork for even more inequality unless each of us as humans make different decisions. So there's another exponential technology I want to tell you about. It's going to transform how we capture information, how we transmit information between humans. It's going to allow us to be able to gather information from previous eras and have it echo down the halls of history. And it's called the printing press. And so the printing press was, again, an amazing device that allowed us to be able to capture information in ways that, and transfer it in ways that humans had never been able to do before. But if you didn't have a printing press, if you hadn't learned to read and write, again, we saw this split, this dynamic. And of course, if the printing press had not existed, then large language models and generative AI would have had nothing to be able to feed on. It's only because we took our information, we put it down on paper, and then eventually we put it into bits and bytes that we were able to capture all that information and then have new technologies that synthesize the information. But again, we have this potential dichotomy. Technology giveth and technology taketh away. Now, here we are in, after 2,000 years, we're finally in Eleusis. I think that's Virginia Woolf. Here we are in Greece, which has a long history of very innovative technologies. If you go to the Greek Museum of Ancient Technology, which our managing partner Heidi Kleinmaus pulled me into just a couple days ago, you find all these amazing examples of the first technology to solve a wide range of problems, and in many cases transform human work. At the far end is the hydraulic telegraph of Aeneas, it was an amazing device that allowed information to be transmitted across the mountains of Greece simply by synchronizing messages in the water, a tube in the water, and a torchbearer on one mountain would hold up a torch for a period of time, and at another mountain, each of these cylinders, the water would descend to a certain point, and that was what was being communicated across these vast distances. And so this is what technology does over and over again. It takes what humans have done, the tasks that we have performed, and it continually makes us more able to solve a wide range of problems, or as Konstantinos would probably say, dilemmas as well. And so what our opportunity is then is to understand that dynamic and then to see how it's being transformed by technology and how we can be in more control of it. So this is a vast oversimplification, but if you think of work markets as essentially human skills, we've talked quite a bit about skills today, especially inner development goals, and what people are willing to pay for work. You can think of work markets, how jobs have been continually created, as being this Venn diagram, this overlap between what our skills are, the kinds of problems we can solve, the kinds of dilemmas we can solve, and then what people are willing to pay us for. What has happened over and over again, starting with the plow, is that, yes, we have prosperity for a period of time, and then new technologies transform work, and suddenly there's a new phase, and another phase, and another phase. So this is what I believe our era is now, is there's a saying by my friend Shelley Palmer, today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. You're going to be telling your kids and your grandkids, I remember when we didn't put a chip in the back of our heads and call a self-driving flying car. The skills needed to be able to solve the problems of today and tomorrow will continually change as well. What the through line is the shelf life of information is what is decaying so rapidly. New skills are required. We don't need a lot of buggy whip manufacturers today. We do need a lot of AI programmers, at least for a little while. But the through line, the center of that, are the inner skills, the durable skills, the transferable skills, what I call the flex skills, that we were talking about earlier today. And so that's one of the ways that we as humans can continually ensure that we can adapt in a world of exponential change. Now, sure, it's the technology we're talking about. Technology du jour is generative artificial intelligence. And then many in Silicon Valley are saying, well, no, it's already or very close to being artificial general intelligence. It's going to replace all human work. And I wrote this actually back in August, why artificial general intelligence, AGI, is actually a false god. It's a god that many in Silicon Valley are worshiping in the hope that their technologies will eventually so transform human work that they'll make tons and tons of money, and maybe we'll have some work and maybe we won't, but that's not their problem to deal with. So how do we think about this? How do we, as humans, how do we navigate this world of constant exponential change? Because it's not just generative AI, it's quantum computing, it's changes in bioscience, neuroscience, archaeobotany. We're starting to understand what the mysteries were by some of the deconstructions of some of the substances that are here. And so each of these accelerates each other. It's very likely that that pace of change is only going to continue. So what do we want as humans? And I'm not trying to be reductionist, I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but Eudaemonia tells us that there's sort of three anchors, and we've also talked today about more, but if you think about what technology does in each of these realms, it giveth and it taketh away. It helps us to solve new problems, but then it also unbundles human work and makes it more challenging sometimes for people to be able to continually adapt to new work. To be healthy, we all have these Fitbits and Oura rings that help us to be able to understand more about our health, but then we also know that more and more technology is being infused into the food that we eat and is designing artificial anything. And then we know that self-knowledge that technology brings us is also a positive good, but then it also can create social dysfunction with social media. All right, so how do we sort of do this Venn diagramming of putting all these pieces together? What are the strategies that we can use? What are the next rules? My book is called The Next Rules of Work. What are the next rules of human flourishing. How can we together be co-creating the ways that we might be able to continue to flourish when technology does both give and take away? And so I'm going to give you what I call sort of the three legs of the stool, and then I'd love to hand the baton off to Konstantinos. So mindset, skill set, and tool set. I'm sorry, to John next. Sorry, got that wrong. Sorry, I screwed up your sequence. Got it wrong. Read the memo. Okay. I say, what's the difference between mindset, skill set, and tool set? So I wave a magic wand, and you and I are standing at the edge of the Aegean Sea. And we have a boat. And I have given you all the skill set of a sailor, somebody like Gabrielle here, with a tremendous capacity to be able to sail, but you look across the sea and you see storm clouds gathering. You have all the skill set, but none of the mindset. Are you going to get in the boat? I don't think so. So I wave the magic wand again, and now you have all of the mindset of a sailor, but you have never sailed before. And you look at this new technology called a boat, and you look at these things called oars, and you have to figure out how they work. You get in the boat, you start to sail across the sea, and yes, the storm clouds come, the waves come, you can't even see the shore. You learn just in time and just in context. You learn skills because your mindset helps you to see that there are problems that you can overcome, and you reach the other shore, and you say, how hard is that? So in a world that's being transformed by technology, we all need a 21st century skill set, and I think the Inner Development Goals are a huge anchor of that. But mindset eats skill set for lunch. The mindset that we have and how we approach exponential change, the way that we all co-create that future together, that mindset has to be about collaboration and making sure that no human gets left behind. However, just to wrap up, I don't care what your mindset and your skill set is. If you're in the middle of the Aegean and you can't even see the shore, you need a good tool set. You need GPS. And so this is what we're talking about today with AI and other technologies is they are tool sets. They are not humans. They're not cobots. They're not co-creators. They're not co-workers, digital co-workers. They are our tools. And so this is our goal is to try to segment these things out and not let technology, the rhetoric of technology becoming this sort of overwhelming thing of human work, but instead how we double down, how we use the technologies to extend human capability. So I'm going to stop here, but I believe if we're going to start anywhere, what this event has been about and what so much of the discussion is, how do we build that mindset and encourage that mindset in others to be able to continue to adapt in a world of change? All right, so I'll stop there.
Hello. Hello. I want to say a special thank you to Phil. If any of you had the pleasure of going on the tour this morning, Phil helped me remember. You can applaud Phil. Phil's written. How many books have you written? 750? You're like the Stephen King of religious studies, etc. But anyway, Phil's tour of Eleusis was genuinely moving. And it actually inspired me to write a song. So I'm going to use part of my 10 minutes to write a song. Thank you to Phil. I also want to say thanks to Gary and Heidi, his wife. To make new friends is incredible. To a mentor and dear friend, Konstantinos. He's the reason I'm here, as well as Alexandra. And then to my best friend and partner, Gabrielle. And could you show the slide that we made? Because now I'm just going to vamp until the slide goes up, because that has the lyrics on it. Burrito, my friends. Am I saying that right? How do you say thank you again? I'm going to start again because I can't say like thank you in Spanish for churritos. Let me start again. Eforisto, my friends, Eforisto, one and all. You have helped me flourish. In Eleusis, I heard the call. Alexandra, our muse. You can applaud here for Alexandra. Sharing light for you and me. Taking comfort and wonder, yeah. Seeing ourselves in community. Transforming our lives in mystery. Rise, won't you rise in ecstasy? Oh, won't you rise, rise just like Persephone? Oh, Eudaemonia's here if we open our eyes and hearts to see. Our eyes and our hearts to see. Thank you. Efaristo. Please edit the other mispronunciation out. And with my 6 minutes left, what's the next step for flourishing and technology in our lives? One word. One word. Caregiving. I've studied flourishing and economics for about 15 years. I've been around the world largely because of Konstantinos getting to work for and with him. And all around the world, I see people who love their children. I see people who love nature. I see people, like in this beautiful conference, trying to figure out how to love themselves. And I speak for myself. I find it very hard sometimes to love myself. I like myself, don't always love myself. Care is active. Care is something you can do even when you don't feel like it. And when you care for others, and I've studied the science of empathy and compassion and altruism, the actual positive psychology science of altruism says when you are kind to someone else, you feel the same effect that they get in receiving that kindness. And I wrote a book called Hacking Happiness, Why Your Personal Data Counts and How Tracking It Can Change the World. I can put you in an MRI machine and study your brain patterns and show you when your child, if you have a child as a parent, walks in the room, the patterns change. A beautiful rainbow of colors when you see your child walk in the room. Do I need to? Do I need to quantify these things? I've talked about quantifying for years because that book, Hacking Happiness, is when because I'm a geek, like we're all kind of geeks and nerds up here, and thank you, Gary, for your presentation. Quantifying. I can wear a wristband and tell you my heart rate. I can tell you sweat on my hand when I'm nervous. That can go to a computer. I wrote an article for The Guardian years ago, about 10 years ago, about 3 or 4 women whose boss, who was a guy and a jerk, walked around and at the same time every day was like, knock, knock, knock. You working hard or you hardly working? One of those jerks, you know? And by jerks, I mean a lovely human who I'm trying to love more. Anyway, the point being, these women were angry, and they started to take examples of their data, their wrist data, their eye tracking data that also can gauge nervousness, and all these different things. And one of the women went to her boss, and again, this is a fictional story, but I wrote it for The Guardian to demonstrate these technologies. They went to their boss and they said, every day at 4:30, when Gary talks to me, you can see my flourishing diminishes. Suzanne is the same in 15 minutes later, and Christine 15 minutes later than that. Gary is killing us. The reason I bring that up is not to be negative, but to say if we don't take account for certain things, literally, but then we say we can't quantify them, what that means is they're invisible, although they are often the most beautiful and deepest things that we have in our lives. One of these, we may talk about it more later, is water. And thank you again to Alexandra for the amazing speakers you've arranged. Yesterday, I was particularly struck by the gentleman talking about Taoism and the aspect of water. And if you really dig into the data centers that are driving modern large language models, and artificial intelligence, by the way, is a whole array of technologies, deep learning, inverse reinforcement learning. And one thing Konstantinos made sure to have happen is to always use the phrase systems, artificial intelligence systems, because that reminds us that when we say that, then we can say we're looking at a specific type of technology or methodology. Without that, the phrase artificial intelligence, do you know what it actually is? It's a narrative. It's an ideology. Oftentimes one that says humans will be replaced. It is inevitable. Why? Because we aren't always measuring the things that are the most important. So I mentioned data centers. In 2022, there's an organization called the Uptime Institute. They do surveys of data centers. Data centers are where the computers that house modernity exist, right? And all of our data, by the way. In 2022, the number's only gone up a little. They measured 800 data centers and asked them, how many of you measure how much water you're using to cool the computing systems that power modern times? The number was 39%. 39% of the people that run the data centers, that drive the computers, that drive any form, not just of artificial intelligence, but any frontier technologies. And when you ask them why don't you know more? And this is not to demonize those folks. They say there's not a business incentive, or there's not a policy regulation telling us we should measure the water. In closing, this is what I'll say for the rest of our time together and what Konstantinos and I worked on for years. We must prioritize human and ecological flourishing at the outset of design and through the entire life cycle. And if we don't know how much water is being used for these systems, then we can't call it responsible AI. It's not even very scientific. So I bring all these things up, and thanks for letting me sing, because for me, music, even though I can't quantify it in certain ways, I know how your brain's changed. Hopefully your dopamine kicked in. But back to caregiving. Care for ourselves in ways we've learned about at this conference. You care for others, because even when you try to care for someone else, you'll increase your own kindness. And then care for our beautiful, beautiful planet. We gotta take care of her first, or she will not be here for 7 generations for our planet and for our children. Thank you.
So, Mr. Karachalios, will humans be replaced?
So, there is one thing that is worse than speaking after John. It is speaking before him. In any way, he will shadow you, but I will try my best. First of all, I will say a few things, and that I don't have the time to explain them, but I want them to be said. Techni and techniki. These are Greek words which are almost quite equivalent, have made humans to what we are. I deeply believe in this. The tools that we use have made us human. So this is very important to understand. So it is not something that we use. They have become part of ourselves. Another thing is, this is the Promethean moment in human evolution. Another point is, has this thing, technique, or the tools, somehow self-emancipated themselves? They became a new entity. Because in the whole narrative about AI, it is a new entity, a new ontology that will face us. Has it ever been so? I mean, the first, perhaps, who has put it in very strong wording was Heidegger in an interview 50 years ago, where he said, it is a new thing, it is our master, we cannot escape anymore, we are lost. And the whole narrative today about AI will replace it. It reflects this Heideggerian moment. I don't believe in this. I think this is a wrong question. The problem, and there is a problem, is the mentality, the practices, and the collective imaginary, as Castoriadis has coined this term, of the techno-scientific communities, which have become a sui generis war machine. Deleuze call it machine de guerre. It is a group of people who don't care about anything else than about the rules they set themselves for themselves. And a very good example is capitalism. I mean, the earth may disappear, but we make profit. If it is not embedded in something else. If everything is externality, outside the profit, then this is a war machine. What is our incentive? I'm a scientist and technologist myself. And this is not the same. These are very different people. I cannot go into the detail what distinguishes a scientist from a technologist. But believe me, these are very different incentives. And of course, there are gray zones. But here, for convenience, I speak for technoscientism. So, and I believe that they do not have good intentions. I do not believe they just solve problems. They have intentions, but objectively, if we regard the outcome, we are about to be annihilated as humanity from different angles, not only from one. I think it is quite a coincidence we still exist. I'm not a pessimist. I'm seeing things the way they are. And I'm fighting. Until the end, I will be fighting. But within zero time, within the last 200, 300 years, we will be brought to the level of extinction. This is all technology related. How can it be? How can it be that we are all innocent? At least we should be humble, admit our share of responsibility and take care of it. Practically, not in words, but it starts with humility. Yes, we are responsible for this. And yes, we should try everything to turn it around. Perhaps it is too late, but we should do an effort, at least. And the whole narrative about AI is part of it. I don't take it very seriously. I'm not a singularitarian. I don't believe machines will ever have any kind of intelligence. Intelligence, yes, in the Latin term, but not noimosini in the Greek term. I don't have time to explain the difference. So, the whole question is, and I repeat it, how can we, scientists and technologists, assume our share of responsibility practically from the beginning and throughout the life cycle of what we are doing. Because if we don't do it, we are all lost. We are not something marginal, and we are not something benign. People should be cautious of us, and we cautious of ourselves. So, this may sound tough for my colleagues, but if you reflect, what are the extinction level threats that we, humanity, are facing? And where do they come from? I mean, with the exception of a meteorite falling down and so on, like the dinosaurs. And this is what I've been doing in the past 20 years. I've been trying to put this question into practice. And I mean, the last big éclat I have faced, a kind of scandal, was in a conference organized by the Stavros Niarchos Foundation 3 years ago, precisely. And I was in the closing panel with a very famous personality who was asked, what do you believe? Is technology and science neutral? And he said, of course it is neutral. We have always good intentions. I'm producing a hammer to fix a nail, and if you use this hammer to kill somebody, this is not my business, I'm not responsible. Well, what is the biggest problem people like you are facing? We are all adults, mature, we have procreated, we have children. What is your biggest problem right now? Honestly, tell me. Yeah, yours, Alexander, of your children. Eh? What is the biggest problem your children are facing?
Be an issue.
So, I think if you ask the children and you see what is happening today in the news everywhere in Greece, the children have a huge problem. Many of them are addicted, and heavily addicted. Yes. And you cannot solve this problem as parents. You cannot solve this problem as teachers, because we create this addiction on purpose. There is zero innocence there, zero good intention, zero benign. How is it? How is this? And why do you accept this? Tell me. Why? How can it be that we consider these crooks to be heroes that create this and run these platforms? And why? For instance, a few days ago, I read an article that a so-called global public health responsible for Google, the guy said publicly, and it is public, so I'm not saying something that it is, he said, you know, we know that children get addicted in certain dark patterns, and for certain contents, we are going to take away these addictive mechanisms. I thought, what is he saying now? First of all, he admits he knows exactly which users are children, because when we were asking them, they said, we don't know. This is why we cannot differentiate the access. We don't know, and they know. And he admits it publicly that he knows. And then he says, we know we make them addictive, and we know how to stop it, but we stop it where we want. If I were the public prosecutor in Greece, I would immediately go after him. What are you saying there? What are you saying there? You are selling heroin to the children on purpose, and you know it, and you make money out of it. Sorry to be so blunt and so explicit, but this is where we are. And we have to turn this around, starting by making these people accountable, and it is possible, believe me, and we ourselves, who are their servers for money, we should stop doing it. The coders, the system architects, and so on. And we should try to earn our money with better jobs than this. That's the Googles, the Metas, and so on. So it is possible. And this has been the purpose of my life in the past 20 years. And we see progress. This is happening because we ally ourselves with policymakers and we technical people who start assuming our responsibility. We must work together with others to bring solutions. And if any one of you wishes to know more, because we're an open system and people can contribute from whichever angle, please come and we can talk about this. So, thank you for your patience.
Well. I should have stayed in my music room. First off, I want to thank you all. But I also, by listening to what you had to say or sing, would you say that we as species have a tendency to act or react like we've won through technology the evolution lottery? If would you say that as we as species have a tendency to act or react like we have won through technology the evolutionary lottery? Go first.
So a couple of things I'd say. First off, there's another great phrase by Bruce Sterling, the science fiction author. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And so the answer is that, especially in this era where new technologies are continually coming out and reaching a wide range of people, there certainly are people in Silicon Valley that have been able to build their reputations and their businesses on the capacity for continually developing these new technologies that they see as breakthroughs that will disrupt previous ways of doing things and create new opportunities. So I'd say there is a deep mindset promulgated by Silicon Valley that that's true. However, what it's required is that there's a moral contortion that you have to go through, which is that the mindset of the entrepreneur that is doing that disruption does not feel that they are responsible for what are called negative externalities. If you create a social media app, I call these devices that we all carry around your digital distraction device. And if I create a social media app that is addictive, I will make tons and tons of money. I'll connect a whole bunch of people that might never have been connected before. I'll keep people connected throughout their lives from when they met in school. And those are all the positive benefits that I was talking about. But the negative externalities, the addiction of children, all of the ripple effects of creating far more disaffection in society, I don't take responsibility for. So I would say the innovators will always want to take responsibility for being the ones that won the lottery and are able to help humans to be able to continually do new things. The challenge that we collectively have is that that is not designed to be a net benefit to society. That's not the business model of these organizations.
Yep, of course.
So, about 50 years ago, Buckminster Fuller said something which I think is very interesting. He said that technology has brought us to a point, humanity, where we can satisfy all fundamental needs. There is no need for war anymore. War is obsolete from this perspective. So, from this aspect, we won the lottery. We have won the lottery, but we are not using the dividend we got. So, but this is not technology that is responsible for this, other things. Technique, Prometheus has delivered, in my opinion. Technology could be a huge boon for society, huge. It is us who are the problem. So it is not the...
So Konstantinos and I think it was our first conference we went to together in about 2016. We saw a guy named Martin Ford speak, and he had just written a book called Rise of the Robots. Kind of a dour, serious guy. It was in England, I forget where. And he said something I believe is absolutely true, having studied economics for about 15 years. He said, with GDP, which is still the one metric that is used around the world for policy, and it equates in business essentially to a law to focus on your shareholder profits with as increased productivity as possible. So what Martin said is, he said, you have to remember, and this was almost 10 years ago, these discussions on AI and work, any job that can be replaced will be replaced as soon as it can if we stay in the paradigm of GDP. He said that, and I sat for a long time depressed, and then I've made it my life's mission to say, what are we not counting? And I had the pleasure of meeting Joseph Stiglitz, so I know you know him, Gary, and the Stiglitz Commission back in 2009 with Amartya Sen and all these leading economists said it is easier to measure human well-being or flourishing than it is to measure GDP. Easier, statistically. And you measure before, not just after, looking backwards. But, and this is where I'll say some things, and Konstantinos always inspires me in this way, there's things you can say that are just true. Mark Zuckerberg bought, 1/3 of the island of Maui. Anybody been to Maui? It's a pretty nice place. The indigenous people there are not overly happy. And what it is, it's a bunker. You can call it something different. It's a bunker. It's a bunker. So this is me. When someone's like, it's going to be fine, responsible AI, AI for good, but excuse me while I build a bomb shelter and keep harming the planet, it's okay to say, and I'm trying to move from a place of anger to a place of like Martin Luther King inspired civil disobedience, but to say politely, but very firmly, Mr. Zuckerberg, you need to take care of the planet. And the bunker thing, that's not cool. Another thing I hate, I'm sorry, that phrase is strong. I dislike the phrase, don't hinder innovation. This is what you hear in policy or business meetings all the time for AI. Someone says something that gets other people freaked out about money, and we're all freaked out about money. I speak for myself. Then someone says, don't hinder innovation, don't overregulate. The phrase don't hinder innovation, and then I'll give back the mic, Google about a month ago, and I think they're still facing, I think the world's largest antitrust lawsuit for about $300 million or $1 billion because they paid both Samsung and another phone company $2 billion to make their Google results at the top. That's not innovation. That hinders innovation. Apple, I used to do a lot of research in augmented reality back in 2007. Back then, Apple was buying patents on the things that you're starting to see now. Patents hinder innovation. Mostly what hinders innovation for young entrepreneurs is how business is actually run with VCs. So the opportunity, the gift is to say, what aren't we measuring? How do we measure these things? But also just to say things that might make you uncomfortable, and I'm not interested in getting political or saying this side versus that side, but just saying, Mr. Zuckerberg, you could use a little less money, maybe not like the 6th or 7th boat, and we're gonna ask politely that you take care of the planet based on the systems that you've been able to use that need to change because we wanna have our children and our planet around for 7 generations and longer.
I think I told you like an hour ago, I was reading this amazing article. It was at the New Yorker magazine, talking about the bunkers rich people were building in New Zealand. It was like a comedy or a comic tragedy, as we have it here in Greece, because I was thinking that, let's say, even if I had the money to do so, I could most probably be self-sustained or sustainable within a bunker for, let's say, 2 years. After that, what kind of a world would be for me out there? So I would either have to be high on drugs or high on drugs in order to be able to face and continue, I don't know, doing something. Anyways, but based on what you said and on what you said, so since the current measurements of the world do not account for ecological or human flourishing, would there be any difference if we transitioned from a monetary-based economy to one primarily dominated by information exchange? In other words, is there a way we can ensure or even escape that innovation, is responsible or irresponsible? What are we doing, man? I mean, really, where are we going?
I have an answer, but I just spoke, so I'll go after. Oh, okay. Well, thank Alexandra, because the word is flourishing. Let me explain. When you leave here, what's the most important thing? Seeing your kids, seeing your partner, taking care of the planet, right? And I mentioned water. I studied the economics of water because pretty quickly, water is going to be the thing that causes more immigration issues, more war, etc., than anything else. And it's the essence of our lives. Now, here's the good news. Countries like Australia, last year, they have their first what they call well-being economy. And it's not people like running around holding trees, waving at babies. It is hard, pragmatic data where they say, we're going to prioritize children's mental health. You want to know why? You prioritize children's mental health. You know what goes up? The GDP. What? When you put them first, and Konstantinos can talk more about wonderful work he created with an incredible woman named Baroness Beeben-Kidron in the UK with something called age-appropriate design. If you prioritize people and planet first, it doesn't mean that profits are not going to be focused on, but it does mean you say, what's most important? Our kids. Not just because we like our kids, but because once you measure them, then you say the future is actually taken care of. So flourishing in caregiving, the thing is I'm used to for 15 years, saying things and having people kind of roll their eyes and their eyes glaze over, and I'm talking to a CFO or whoever else. But then I get them in a side room and I'm like, can you show me pictures of your kids? And they melt. And then you say, does it make sense that if we prioritize people and planet first, business, and by the way, there's a book called Net Positive by Paul Pullman. He ran Unilever for 10 years, made shareholder wealth. I mentioned Australia, Wales. There are multiple countries around the world that are basing their metrics not only on GDP, but on the metrics of caring for people and planet first. That's number one.
Bhutan.
That is what we can do.
Bhutan being one of them. I don't know. Bhutan in Asia, based on the happiness of its people. It's called Bhutan. Yeah.
Yeah. And I could keep talking about it, but I'll give the mic to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've been talking about one aspect, which is the personal well-being, in particular of the future generation, which is extremely important. I would like, so what is more important than profit or a personal, let's say, pocket? And let's say, we're in Greece. And there is a word in Anglo-Saxon which has a very interesting meaning, the word idiot. You know what it means? You English people or American, you know what idiot means in Greek? Private. Yeah. It means private. Where does it come from? It comes from Thucydides' epitaph of Pericles' speech. And there he says that we in Athens, we call the ones who care only about themselves, idiotes, the private, we call them useless and detrimental to the city. This is why idiot has the meaning it has for you, but it means private. So the question is, how? And the question is, what is democracy And what is the one thing that we need for democracy? The one. We need a demos. Without demos, there is no democracy. So what is the demos? And this is where the idiot comes in, because the idiot does not want any demos. He stays away, or see, from demos. Demos is a collective of people who have a common purpose. They may disagree violently how to get there, but we have a common purpose. And this became possible here, in this place where you are. This is the Greek invention, the invention of the demos. And this brought everything else you know. Without this, there would be no science. There would be no art in our understanding of art. There would be no philosophy. Demos is the foundation of everything in the West. This is the difference to China. So, the question is, can we somehow create demos locally, virtually, wherever? Because otherwise, what are we talking about? What kind of flourishing? Thank you. No, not for me. For me, flourishing is flourishing in a community, but in a specific community. It is not the jihad or the religious and so on. It is a community for emancipation and freedom. But freedom, again, in the Greek sense, and sorry for bombarding you with this, this is the opposite to the Anglo-Saxon freedom. Because in Greek, freedom, free is the one who is available to come, not to go. It makes only sense in the demos, freedom. So these are the things. And the question is, what is the role that technology plays right now? There are very rare cases, and we know them, where the new technologies establishes the demos. There are a few ones.
Like, for example?
In Taiwan, the transition from a dictatorial system they had to democracy became possible through students who established platforms which make it possible for the people to become citizens and to support them when they occupy the parliament. This was the only Occupy movement which survived because they used technology to create a demos. So it is possible. This is wonderful to listen to Audrey Tang speaking about this. So, but most of technology today destroys the demos. It does not create it. And it destroys the mental health of our children. So we have to do something about it.
Not just our children.
I beg your pardon?
And ours too, I said.
Yes, yes. But
It's not
we're
adults, children,
adults,
all together. We're all in that.
Yes, we're adults. How we commit suicide, it is our business. But for the children, we must give them the chance to have a childhood.
So, let's move to China a bit, Mr. Konstantinos. I said, let's move to China. So, I'm an avid Go gamer. If you don't know what a Go game is, it's a board game. It's an ancient Chinese board game. It's even more ancient than chess. I love to play Go game. So back in 2016, I watched the fight between a human and a machine. In 2016, the Go world was rocked when, after Lee Sedol, one of the greatest players ever, was defeated by AlphaGo, the AI program made by Google's DeepMind. And actually, the guy who runs, I think he still runs DeepMind, is a Cypriot guy. I don't remember his name. I'm sorry. So what happened when, because Lee Sedol lost to the machine, Lee Sedol, 3 years later, he resigned, and he said, I can't do that no more. So this summer, like around July, I've read an interview of his. He told the New York Times, losing to AI, in a sense, meant my entire world was collapsing. Even if I become the #1, there is an entity that cannot be defeated. He also added that his larger concern is what AI will do to people's appreciation for originality. and by the way, I have seen that as far as music, and you too. People used to be in awe of creativity, originality, and innovation, but since artificial intelligence came, a lot has disappeared. Any thoughts?
I do, but Gary, you haven't talked for a while.
So, Winston Churchill said years ago, we shape our buildings and our buildings shape us. And that's been modified to say we shape our technologies and our technologies shape us. So I would say at the core of what you're talking about is identity, is human identity. You may think of yourself as a parent, a sibling, a citizen, a lawyer, a doctor. Each of us have anchors in the ways we think of ourselves. And so when it comes to either our vocations or our avocations, we come from a world in the past where in many cases they changed. They just didn't always change at such a rapid pace as they're changing now. Many of you know that the Luddites of 16th century England, who tried to destroy the loom weaving machines, were previous weavers who then had to become the tenders of loom weaving machines that others owned and got paid horrible wages. And they also had to go through the identity shift that they were no longer weavers, they were simply machine tenders. And so this is what happens so many times with technology, is it changes how we can apply our skills, what we can get paid for. And what is necessary is for us to be able to have an understanding as to what are the anchors of our identity and how can we help those to continue to change.
Of course, but this is, if you think about it, this is far more than being, working somewhere.
No, absolutely.
It's because Go game is supposed to be fun.
Yes.
So you're losing your identity as having fun. Also, if that, let's say, God forbid, happened with us being parents.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having somebody coming, knocking on your door and saying, listen, I don't think you are a fit parent, so here's the machine Kafka that can actually replace.
Parent replacement. Yeah, here's the robot.
What's my next step?
Well, so I would want to separate those things out. I understand completely, but I know photographers who are going through a really significant challenge because each of us has these incredible devices that can duplicate the level of quality that they were able to create even just a few years ago. And so I'm not saying, not just some Pollyanna answer, I'm saying this is this sort of duality that we have, is that technologies are continuing to come in that are transforming so many different vocations and avocations that we have. I'm not trying to trivialize in any way that a Go player who was so invested in this game and had dedicated their life to being one of the best they could possibly be at it, that unmooring is not devastating. It's devastating. However, I don't have an answer to how to stop that part of the process because, again, technology creators are trying to find problems that they can solve, or maybe dilemmas that they can solve, but they're trying to find complex problems that they can solve, and they can throw technology at it, and what ends up happening then is that others will pay to keep that going, to be able to have those technologies do those things. And so for each of us as humans then, so I'll give you an example. If I thought of myself as a lawyer, and I used to do what's called discovery for lawsuits, and now all discovery is automated. The process is completely done by robots. I have to back up to what are the skills that I used in that context. And I'm not saying this is the answer for your Go player friend, but what are the problems that I'm good at solving? And are there other ones that I can use those skills on that I can continually apply in new ways?
Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to base my last question on what you're just saying, but please.
So first of all, I don't know if I'm going to disagree with Gary, but in the US, things are different than Europe. If I get fired, no one's going to pay me to get trained in anything. If I don't have health insurance, I don't have health insurance. And I used to be a professional actor. So one thing is, can I swear? Is that okay to swear? Let's just get the bullshit out. For 10 years, I've been in meetings, and I'm not talking about Gary. Gary is enlightened, and I love the guy, and we've been having wonderful meals. But where people are like, AI is going to give us time to go on the beach. And I'm like, no. So here's the thing that I'm excited about, and I want to shift my anger to joy. This is time for a revolution, but like a Martin Luther King peace-oriented revolution. But if you don't know about Martin Luther King, he took the young people that went into the soda fountain place and they rehearsed for hours and hours and hours knowing that they were going to get pulled out of that place and beaten. This is, I don't want to use terms like fight because then it makes it military. But I want to be clear, and this is about the Go player. Do we want a society that says technology in the form of AI? Do we want a society that says we want society to be judged on the point where humans are replaced? My answer is no thanks. And I feel for the Go player, but I've been a writer for years. I'm a musician. I've gotten over the fact that I can't run 150 miles an hour because a car can do that. The actual metrics of the planet that say we can allow machines, and by the way, Go beating him, I feel for the guy. The larger issue is the paradigm of wealth going to change or not. For me, I want to look at my kids and say, I fought, I spoke, I work with people like Konstantinos and Gary and Kafka, whose name I love. And I said, this beautiful planet comes first. Anybody? This is a revolutionary thing. If you don't raise your hand right now, raise your hand with me. Say this: I'm okay with the world being run by GDP, and I'm okay with the fact that the planet in 5 to 10 years will be on repair. Are you good with that? Raise your hand. I'm not going to raise my hand to that. How about this? Raise your hand to the idea of flourishing. Ask these people we've heard of, also from China, also from around the world. Rationality and relationality coming together. We have a joyful opportunity to say, I will not let machines or wealth determine my worth, my children's worth, nature's worth. And we have the wonderful, blissful opportunity to say society will be gauged first and foremost on our planet being taken care of and our kids being taken care of. Anybody? Feel free to raise your hand.
Both hands.
If you leave this room and you don't fight for that, then we will go into the future where the Go player is all of us, because right now the world is saying we are basing society's success on the moment when AI replaces humans.
Very precise answer to your question. My response is limited to the Go and this player. I think the guy did not lose to AI. He did not lose to a machine. He did not lose to entity. He lost against a huge team of experts who worked for years, who made millions of simulations. In his life, he had 20,000 games to play. So it is a man against a huge team. I mean, how can you win against them? So, I mean, I would be able to live with this because I'm not losing against AI. I'm losing against a huge team who have worked for years to take me down. And okay, I fought and I lost, but I'm not losing my dignity because of this. I think he makes an error, an error of judgment, this guy, in my humble opinion.
There's this song by Bobby Fuller. There's this song by Bobby Fuller, I fought the law and the law won. Remember that song? And then the class took it. So we only have 2 minutes, right, Myrto? And then you're coming. So questions. We have more. It says 2 minutes here.
I have one.
Yeah, we can proceed with the questions and then, okay.
So we are having this conversation in a very privileged experience, because when I think about this, or I think about how wonderful I am because I drive a fully electric car and I'm no longer dependent on oil, I think of the little children in the Congo who are extracting the cobalt and the minerals from the earth in order to have this. So if we're going to have a revolution, it's literally to throw that away completely and figure out, where do I go from here? It's not just to create ethics around the use of the technology, which, by the way, I'm getting a master's in, but I'm just saying the unintended consequences of technology is what is also stripping and ruining the planet. So I just want to make that connection, because when we speak to machines and all the things, we're the ones who are creating it. So where would this revolution that we're envisioning, this non-violent, incredible, massive, wonderful human rise, flourishing to the lovely evergreen, where does it begin? And how does it start? Because unless we get rid of what makes the computer, the other stuff doesn't really matter.
You know, I have this music box. Where is it? It's completely analog. We don't need phones anymore. Who's that?
The music box.
Are we answering the question?
Yep, of course. What about the music box? Are we improvising?
No. I just...
Okay.
Okay, here's a pragmatic thing, and then maybe we can go down the line. Invite people in the room who aren't normally here. So I've learned so much from indigenous wisdom, from non-Western teachings, and for me it's never don't think about the West, it's about including. So a friend of mine I'm talking to later today, his name is Sabelo Molambi. He's based in Africa. One of the best papers you can read in the space of artificial intelligence is called From Rationality to Relationality. And it gives a beautiful portrait of AI governance using Ubuntu ethics. But also the thing that I've been trying to do, and it seems like you could too, you know, you're obviously in wonderful rooms like this, and thank you again, Alexandra, is to say to people, we are allowed to bring up things that are awkward. We're allowed to say in rooms where people are talking about Google and someone from Google is speaking, excuse me, thanks for the technology. I use Google. I'm tired of being angry. But I don't understand why over here, if someone from your company says don't hinder innovation, and over here you have the biggest antitrust lawsuit. Wouldn't it be easier for you too if you measured people and planet first? The Guardian talked about Google a month ago saying they missed their ESG metrics by 50%, 50. And one thing they said is it's really hard to measure the planet. Who uses Google Maps? Google measured the planet. It's not hard to measure the planet. It's hard to get companies and ourselves to say, we cannot live on productivity, GDP-based metrics alone. But the awkward part of it is to say, also, it's okay to not be okay with these things happening.
So if I can respond too, so because I want to respond directly to the questions, like how does it begin? So the place it begins, I believe it always begins, is to help people to understand what power they have. So many of the messages that we see in the headlines, so many of the stories that we're getting from the Silicon Valley innovators and beyond, by the growing gap between the have-lots and the have-nots, is that you have less power. And I think it begins with helping every community to be able to understand what power they have. And so that's a power. You just exerted a power. The kids don't have to have the technology in their hands, you know, every hour, every waking hour of the day. And so how do you help communities across the world to be able to understand what power they can exert? And then how can they solve problems together? One of the most inspiring talks I've heard was actually when we talked last night about what this community is doing to continually come together, to be able to reinvent itself and what it can become. And that is exactly where it begins. But what is the through line is a positive narrative. If the narrative stays negative, and I think this has been common throughout here, if it's a negative narrative, we are disempowered. We're simply a negative externality that others in power are simply not factoring for, then we have no position to change. But if we feel empowered, we can help others to be empowered, to know what their power is and what kinds of problems they can solve themselves, and that can be done at scale. That's where it has to begin.
One of the things that history has taught me is that humans, they love negative narratives. And yeah, but there is a gentleman over there who wanted to, yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much for the, is it operational? Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much for the very, very interesting session. I must admit that I'm partially biased because I'm coming from a similar background too. I did my PhD at MIT in 2007. I actually met with John in 2016 in the IEEE Ethics Conference in Brussels, where I was speaking to. And I've spoken also at the Singularity University session in Athens. So it's very interesting that you brought three different perspectives to something that has been happening, is happening, and will happen in the future. But beyond, of course, it would have been nice to also have some quantitative data to see where we are when it comes to tracking the progress of its effects at the level of all the different sides of its effects, be it stuff that has to do with jobs, be it stuff that has to do with technology acceptance, with people's opinions and attitudes around the world, also with how much of the people's voice is actually being heard and in which ways when it comes to how things are unfolding. But beyond all that, let's go to the more proactive side. What do you think would be the necessary changes in at least 4 different levels in order to have a better future given the current development? So the first level being the level of the meaning of life and its connection to jobs and lifelong professions. The second being a change in economic systems. The third being a change in political systems, given the fact that now you can have machines that can help in deliberations, but also other participatory mechanisms. And number 4, what is a possible change at the level of global systems? Will a unipolar hegemonical world, will a bipolar hegemonical world, will multipolar worlds be able to afford a better future in that respect? So jobs and the meaning of life, political, economic, and global systems. Where to go?
All right, I tend to do the mic too many times. Anyway, here's the stat. The World Wildlife Fund did a report at the end of 2022 where they reported that since 1970, 69% of all ecosystems and species are eradicated. So I'm going to put all your 4 questions together. And again, rather than be angry, and my wife has really helped me shift from anger to joy, thank you. Here's this wonderful thing, but also a thing to keep in mind. That statistic means that nature is actually dying. And it doesn't make a difference if I care about a certain species or you don't. If a certain bird goes away, then the bird can't carry in their poop seeds to another tree, and the ecosystem dies. So one thing we're working on this paper with IEEE called Strong Sustainability by Design. There's the physics of the planet. It's not about climate change and politics. It's about saying, for instance, how much water is available to the citizens of Eleusis right here. And people like Eleanor Ostrom, most of my heroes are women economists, made a great point. And here's the thing that I take joy in, but I hope it's a positive narrative to Gary's point. You say the word regulation, and a lot of people get freaked out. Why? SB 2047 in California, Governor Newsom, support that if you can. He's one of the first people saying, hey, companies have to say what they're going to do before they do it. What? Shocking. So it doesn't have to be that hard if you say to companies, and this is for us too, this is the hard part as consumers, before you buy something, before you do something, do you know how much water you're going to use? And if the answer is no, then a first invitation is to say, we need to collectively know how much water is going to be used. That's just good science. Then the second thing is to say, do you need that water? And then like in California, for instance, you'll see signs when you drive on the highway. You can't use your hoses today to water your grass. It's getting pretty basic. And so these 4 questions, I think, while we still have the time to even think about joyful solutions, is to say regulation can be great. Regulation is innovation if it doesn't just mean, because here's the thing, anytime business in general talks in the technological sphere, it ends up in regulatory capture, which is not innovation. It's the same over and over and over. If we say nature comes first, here's how much is available, and are we taking care of the nature for all of our kids and the plants and stuff around us, then we even have a future. So I hope I answered all 4 of your questions in one, and that's what I wanted to, but that stat is real. That stat is real. Nature is dying. Good news and bad news.
So let me just, you asked a very complicated question, and you got a great answer kind of from a slightly different angle. So humans, communities, economies operate based on a system of incentives and disincentives. That's what we do. If I told you that there's you enjoyed driving in a mind-numbing commute and working in a cubicle farm in a company, and suddenly there's this global pandemic coming and you can't go. Like if you have to change your behavior. If you want to keep your job, you've got to learn how to do this work from home thing. And if the company or organization is going to stay in business, then it's going to have everybody do that for a period of time. Well, then we said we couldn't do that before, and then suddenly we all did. Okay, so what we learned is that humans can change on a dime. Like we can all adapt very, very quickly. But that was because of a set of incentives and disincentives, and many of us, depending upon the country, agreed, at least to some extent, what those incentives and disincentives were. We want more people to live and fewer people to die, right? And then these were the decisions that we made. So take that as an example of how humans, on a global basis, can suddenly make a whole set of new decisions, come together to innovate, to solve a common problem, and then roll out the solution in a blindingly short period of time, in part because there was these leap forward technology called mRNA, but also social systems. Look at Brazil. In Brazil, I won't name the leader at the time, but he was dead set against vaccines. Every community in Brazil came together to come up with a way that they could actually distribute vaccines that had nothing to do with what the federal government was doing. And so we have all these examples where we can come together. What we don't all have, first off, is systems understanding. The people in power, the ones that are guiding so much of the capture that you were talking about, our educational systems are not up to the task, not as a bug of the system, but as features of the system, so that we don't have the information, the understanding of how these systems work and how we can change them and fix them. And of course, it always starts, you started off with life and economic, but it starts off at the individual level, the power that you have, and then the ways that you can come together to solve problems. So these are what are often called wicked problems. They're complex, interconnected problems, and what they take is people having a systems understanding, and then each taking a part of the problem that they want to solve, a dilemma or conundrum that they need to solve together. And so we've got examples of this. Heidi and I, in 2008, we were obsessed with this whole idea of doing well and doing good, and we started a conference called SOCAP Global, which became the sort of social purpose business of doing well and doing good. And we created what we called the Coalition of the Willing to come across silos from business, from government, from for-profit, non-profit, to all talk about that there is a future where organizations can actually do well for the planet. There are no negative externalities, and do good. They can still be profitable. We have plenty of examples where the kind of change that you're talking about is possible. Each of the different strategies have already been tested. They're just not widely known, easily transferable, or easily scalable yet. And so if you look at countries like Singapore, you have a tremendous example where it was one of the poorest countries on the planet. And now its per capita GDP, if we have to use that metric, is greater than America's. And so over and over again, we have all these examples where collectively, the collective intelligence of humans can solve these problems. We need more social cohesion. We need more processes where we connect with each other to be able to have the infrastructure to solve those problems. And then we need to create the economic incentives and disincentives so we do the right thing.
Konstantina, are you more into a city-state solution when it comes to artificial intelligence or whatever that is?
Yes, I'm getting to this as part of an overall.
Because what he's talking about is something bigger, yes, like a web.
Yes. So, I mean, there were a bunch of questions there. Here we're dealing with technology-related matters and science-related matters. So let us see what is really affected by technology and science, and whether there is something we can do to influence it in a positive way. This is a key question. And we discussed it. There are three overarching big things. And I think we can do something. The first is how can scientists really improve or adapt the paradigm to take into account the outcome, because they don't care about the outcome. They are very interested to discover things, and then they find out, oh, and now what? So they should think about it in real time. And I have some very good examples also from people I've talked about. So they have to change the paradigm. The scientific communities, this is a relatively small community. They have really to adapt the paradigm. Otherwise, they're going to annihilate us all with the mentality they have. The second is, let's say, the technologies. And here I spoke about it, and here comes also your question. You spoke about communities. And of course, it is interesting to empower communities, but I really don't want to empower all communities. I want to empower some communities, and I have the courage to say it. There are communities I don't want to empower. So, and a community that I want to empower is really the city-like thinking community, the polis, the demos. This is what I'm interested in, honestly. The rest, be happy with it. With your bridge playing community or whatever. But I care about this.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a political animal, and the Aristotelian discourse. So, and unfortunately, technology destroys exactly this, and you see what is happening in America. This is the outcome. The demos in America is destroyed. It does not exist anymore. Within 20 years, they annihilated it on purpose. And you see now what is happening. So, the question is, can we create in Europe, in Greece, wherever, polis? And what is this virtual polis? And I think, yes, we can. And with John, we've been doing exactly this. In our field.
We have, I would love to talk to you with you and for you and about you forever. We only have, no, we're not there yet. We have 3.5 minutes. So there was a gentleman there who wanted to ask a question, and some people back there. So first, you go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah,
Yep.
you can. Like him, thank you for this. This was insanely interesting. Despite being brought here to talk about psychedelics, I'm a techie. I've been working with open source frameworks for 15 years, so I really appreciate this. My question. Goodhart's law states that if a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And I feel that this is a problem that has plagued everything in this world, from academia and citations, to companies and revenue, to the whole system that we work in. You said GDP as one metric. Money essentially is a proxy value for everything. How do we go about in a practical way when we're talking to a venture capitalist, to a banker, to a prime minister, to anyone, to make sure that they take other measures into account and not just the easy proxy values that will be going on for centuries?
I'm sorry, can you make this a bit short? I'm terribly sorry, because there's another one gentleman back there, and it's going to be the last question for today's session.
It's a great question. What's kind of funny is that's also a metric, meaning Goodhart's law is a metric, so this irony. A global pandemic that's not talked about enough is that social isolation, loneliness is a global pandemic, a physiological pandemic. So it sounds, the thing is, it was a fantastic question you've asked, but I'm used to being in rooms where the metrics of the people use are not my metrics. I play music, and I know it changes people's minds or hearts. They don't have to like it. So I bring this up because social isolation, the actual pragmatic thing you can do, and we all felt this. When you threw your phone, we all gasped. But what the people, social isolation means that millions and millions of people are at home alone and literally dying. There's research in London that people live 2 years less because of isolation. So caregiving is something that sounds like it's not pragmatic, but also I would disagree respectfully in the sense of metrics of caregiving, when you start to see them, become very powerful about changing people's hearts and minds. And regulation around caregiving, I mentioned Australia. This is my final point, is it's not just okay, we need to say to companies and to ourselves, if you aren't prioritizing nature and people first, start doing that. And that's the answer too. Tell regulators, go to governments and regulators and say, hey, do we know how much of nature we're using? And if the answer is no, then when you say, let's find that out first, and someone says you can't hinder innovation, say, we can't hinder lives. Find out how much of nature is left. It is sacred. Measure it, take care of it, and then take care of people. That's the answer.
So this means if the metrics are very narrow, then you run into the danger you're saying. So, but if you have umbrella, let's say criteria, then it works. Yes, but I mean, we have said them. For instance, if our technology reduces, annihilates childhood, and this is, you see it, then this is a criterion. Don't do it. We don't need to measure it. There are so many people measuring it. It is so evident. Stop doing it. Secondly, if it fragments the communities, if it fragments the demos, stop doing it. We don't need to measure it. It is evident. It is a criteria. And we have spoken about this very explicitly and very clearly. And within this, you may have other things that measure it more precisely. But we should not lose the overall thing. So we are not risking this that you're saying because we are seeing the big picture.
So very briefly, we have to change what we value. We have to change what we value. So if we value companies that make tons and tons of money and we value cheap junk coming from China to America, we're just going to keep going to Amazon and buying it, then what we're doing is we're perpetuating a process by which what we value is what we've valued in the past that is deeply embedded in a capitalistic system. And if instead our mindset is, no, we value things differently, all the capital systems will come along. That is, they will find that they will be successful in a new paradigm where we have broader metrics, where we care about the planet, where we care about each other, and what we are rewarding are the people that deliver that, as opposed to the ones that had the extractive mindset from before.
I would like to thank all three of you for a very interesting conversation and the different perspectives, and Gary especially, your great optimism, because I think at the end we should always have that kind of a mindset. I think technology, regardless, is democratizing access. There's a yin and a yang to everything. Water can save your life or it can take it. I try to look at things like, let's say, Stripe or Shopify that democratize the ability to create commerce for the average person. I've seen paralyzed individuals that could not work, that could not make enough money to sustain themselves, create online businesses and be able to live a better life. AI right now, which democratizes so many things, that gives the power to an average person to create things that they could never imagine before. Or the internet giving the ability to poor Indian farmers that created a market so they can get a better price for their grain. So I try to look at those positive things, and I think we all have the responsibility amongst ourselves, and not necessarily always on big business. What is the right thing for us to do instead of others? And try to do the best we can. And as a collective, if we do enough good, we can create positive things and outcomes and have things like circular economies, right? Like the electric car example. Circular economies makes that better, and we don't have to worry about as much as the abuses that happen, whether it's the petroleum industry or battery industry and so forth. So, thank you.
Yeah. So for those of you who may know, so circular economies, probably one of the best authors is Will McDonough, and who wrote Cradle to Cradle. But the whole mindset is that you're designing for basically the reusability of what we use, all the products and services that we use. What I would urge, where one of the greatest opportunities that I think intersects with what Konstantinos is talking about, is that process of thinking about the ways to be able to leverage these technologies for the benefit of as many as possible. We can start with our kids. We can start with our teenagers, helping them to find problems in their communities that they can solve, ways that they can leverage these technologies. And they can be empowered where now they're not just completely mesmerized by the digital distraction devices, but instead they see them as a tool that allows them to solve real-world problems to help real-world people.
Well,
can I just answer really quick? I love your optimism, but the optimism, respectfully, in the paradigm of the reality, we haven't talked about surveillance capitalism. One of the must-read books by Shoshana Zuboff is The Rise of Surveillance Capitalism. Our personal data being used for all these systems means democracy becomes a very different thing. And our data is who we are. It's our spirit. It's our identity. So I only say this like, I hope it's okay, like I'm optimistic and those things you mentioned are beautiful, but I also love the optimism and the joy that comes from saying, well, can we also be optimistic and support the spirit of those things while we prioritize first the planet and people? Because all it means is the system that changes is how R&D and innovation is done for businesses and policy around the world. And if anybody says, hey, this great technology can do X in India, wonderful. But remember, technology is economics. Technology doesn't just appear in the world. It is funded, it is driven, especially with data. So optimism in these new paradigms I'm talking about, I hope, and I respectfully agree with you, there's optimism in the sense of what happens when we take care of nature first. That's innovation, that's joy, and that's the need. And that's how democracy really will flourish, is if we have enough water, trees, beautiful stuff for everybody for 7 generations to come.
I'm happy. I'm very, very happy to know you. Thank you. It's been wonderful. And ευχαριστούμε, Αλεξάνδρα, στα ελληνικά αυτή τη φορά για όλα όσα έχεις κάνει. And Myrto, it's high time you move towards the stage. And if you find a better singer, just let me know, because now we have to flourish through art. Enough with technology. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Katerina. That was wonderful.